welcome back to the basement. I'm Steve Lewis. Today's episode is going to represent a bit of a departure from the normal fare here in the Beach Boys basement, in that I'm not going to talk about anything specifically Beach Boy related. Back around episode 11, I did a video entitled Elton John Meets the Beach Boys. Turned out it was pretty popular. I was a little worried about that one, but it got a good response. So today I'd like to talk about the time that I nearly met Elton John. It was 1989 on the Who's 25th anniversary reunion tour. But before we get into that fateful evening, let me give you a little background on my feelings about Elton John. Now, when I first began to get interested in rock music, Elton John was the biggest rock star in the world. The second album that I ever bought for my current collection was an Elton John album. Now, prior to that, when I was a little kid, I had Monkees albums. I had a few other 45s. I had Hot Rod Lincoln by Commander Cody and the Lost Planet Airmen. I had Brand New Key by Melanie. I had Partridge Family albums. Had some albums, but they had all gone away. When I was 14, I began to assemble what is my current collection. The very first album that I purchased for that in early 1974 was Buddha and the Chocolate Box by Cat Stevens. This is the very first album that is part of this collection. It's a beautiful package too. Just let me show you this. I just love the concept of the chocolate box. You pull this out and you have these, the lyrics on one side, and you have the chocolate Buddhas on the inside. This was beautiful early mid-70s packaging. That was the very first one I bought. The second album that I was going to buy cost a lot of money. It was a double album. Now back in the day, I think at the mall albums ran around $4.99. Maybe you could get them a little less than that on sale. Maybe, $4.50, something like that, $4.49, something like that. A double album, the cheapest I could find this double album was at Kmart, where it was running $7.99 plus tax. So I collected change in a coffee cup. I think I had an allowance of like $1.50, $2 a week, something like that. And out of that I had to pay for candy, I had to pay for monster magazines, comic books. I had a lot of overhead. And so it didn't allow me a lot of money for records. So it was going to take weeks and weeks to get $7.99 plus tax together to buy this album. Well, I finally did it. I think maybe my mom took pity on me and gave me some job, painting a fence post or something, and paid me some money. But I did finally get it together to get what became the second album of my collection, Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, which just floored me at the time. With all these illustrations. I've shown this before, I know, but all this stuff, you could just get lost in this. It was like going into another world with each one of these songs. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing, and really got me excited about music. The third album of my collection, a short time later, was his prior album, Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player. Again, it's got a beautiful gatefold with a booklet and lots of illustrations, a little hard to show, but just a great, great piece of work. This really got me excited about music. My birthday in 1974, I got the Caribou album. Thank you, Mrs. Wilde. I still have this, still enjoying it all these years later. The gift that keeps on giving. Thanks. A year later, I was there the day Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy was released. I don't know why I wasn't in school. I believe it came out in May. I know school was still on. Maybe it was the end of April. But I was there at Musicland at the mall when they unboxed the first box of this. I remember them opening it up, seeing this cover, and grabbing the first one, and they had to discuss what to charge me for it because they hadn't had the labels put on them yet. The price stickers had not yet been put on it. Got the first one out of the box, Again, don't know why I was there. My mom took me. Maybe I had a dental appointment later in the day or something, but anyway. So I was really big on Elton John. And I remained an Elton John completist despite some pretty dire albums in the late 70s and early 80s. I stayed an Elton John completist up through about 1985, Fire and Ice. Then after that I picked up the albums, but Elton John was the guy that got me interested in music. So, in 1989, I was living in Los Angeles and working for a ticket broker. Now, much to the dismay of myself and my friends, I had discovered that just because you work for a ticket broker doesn't mean that you can automatically get tickets to any show you want to see. And I had bought tickets to see The Who when they came through town at the Coliseum. They were going to be there. I think I had tickets for Saturday, August 26, 1989, at the Coliseum in Los Angeles. But they had also announced that there was going to be an earlier show that was going to have special guests. At the Universal Amphitheater, they were going to do a one-off show with special guests performing Tommy. They were going to have Steve Winwood, Billy Idol, Phil Collins, Patti LaBelle, and much to my excitement, Elton John was going to be reprising his role as the pinball wizard, which he had played in 1975 in the film Tommy. He was doing it without the big shoes and the costume, but Elton John was going to do Pinball Wizard, and I love The Who too, so this was a really exciting thing. It was a charity concert, and the tickets, I don't remember the cost, but it was out of my price range at the time. I was not making a whole lot of money in those days, and going to see this thing was just beyond my budget completely. Well, I was lamenting this to my good friend Gilbert, who was one of the most generous, nicest guys you'd ever meet. And Gilbert took pity on me. He told me he had an in with the security company that was running security for this show at the Universal Amphitheater, which was going to be on August 24th. And that he could get me hired in as a security guy, and that would allow me to see the show. So sometime prior to the show, maybe a couple of weeks prior, Gilbert took me to this place on Hollywood Boulevard, somewhere near Vine. We went upstairs and I filled out a job application and handed it in, and he worked his magic with the people behind the scenes, and lo and behold, I got a call that, hey, you got to be there for security. I was issued this shirt, which I'm wearing. You can see, I'll step up here, it says, Who's Security? This is the shirt that they gave me sometime prior to the concert. The only other writing on it says Public Image Clothing here on the sleeve, but Who's Security? They told me to buy a pair of black trousers. I had to wear black trousers, black shoes, and this shirt. So I bought the cheapest black shoes and the cheapest black trousers I could find, because I'm living in LA. I'm not going to wear black shoes and black trousers in LA. It was hot enough wearing this t-shirt. So went to, I don't know, Kmart or Goodwill or something, got a pair of black trousers that really didn't even fit. They kept falling down, and but they were cheap. That was the main consideration in those days. So night of the show, I don't remember, we had to show up way early. It was still broad daylight, it was still hot. This shirt and those black trousers in the California sun in late August was really miserable. And there were, a group of, 20, 30 young people who were going to do security for this show. Now, one thing that I had not stopped to consider was the fact that these guys also wanted to see the show. So the ones who were in charge were going to put themselves and their friends inside near the stage, and the guys they didn't know, like me, they were going to have us stand outside the building and guard the perimeter, okay? But I figured I can still make this work. I can still make this work. Now, again, I was not as hot on Elton John as I had been, but to see him do Pinball Wizard, I thought that would be pretty cool. And also, I'd love to see The Who and all the other guest stars as well. But, got to remember now, at this point, Elton John's most recent album was the Reg Strikes Back album, which has a beautiful cover, but there's not a whole lot to be said for the music. So, you know, I was kind of down on Elton John's current stuff. A few days later, maybe a week later, this slightly better album, I guess actually quite a lot better album, Sleeping with the Past, would be released. This wasn't quite out yet. I think came out August 29th, about, what would that be, like 5 days after the concert at the Universal Amphitheater. So anyway, they stationed me outside the amphitheater, and I can hear the show going on inside. I'm missing the overture, I'm missing all this stuff. So I thought, well, you know, I'm not going to stand here. I waited until we spread out, and I waited till everybody got out of sight. And then I thought, there's nothing to guard, everybody's inside. I walked inside the building, got inside, didn't get up front, but got inside the auditorium. I think it was right around the time Billy Idol was on stage as Cousin Kevin. I missed Steve Winwood as the Hawker. I know I didn't get to see that. Got in there, slowly worked my way closer and closer to the stage. At one point, one of the guys came along and said, "What are you doing here?" And I, you know, one of the bosses, right, the sergeant or whatever, who was probably 22 years old, came along and said, "You know, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, they told me to stand here." He said, "Well, who told you to stand here?" I said, "Well, I don't know the guy's name. He just said this is where I was supposed to be inside." He goes, "Was it a tall guy with glasses?" Yeah, it was a tall guy with glasses. He goes, "Oh, damn it!" And he ran off looking for whoever that guy was. But he didn't tell me to move, so I got to stay there, got to watch the rest of the show. You can find it on video. It was released in 2006. It hasn't aged well. Really, it would be better if it was just a Who show. The guest stars kind of detract from the thing. But at the time, I really enjoyed it. It was a big event, big night out for me in those days. After the show, there was an after party in the Universal Studios sort of amusement area. And I walked over there, and they were checking IDs. This was a VIP party for, you know, several hundred people who came out of the concert and then had these passes to get into Universal Amusement Park. So I went up and started checking passes, letting people through. Stood there for a while, and I knew there was another party further on in. The further you got in the circle, the better the party got. So after checking passes there for a while, I stopped, walked to the next set of passes being checked, and began checking passes there, and then kind of worked my way in. Finally, I worked my way into the inner VIP party, which was in this little courtyard area that was seated probably less than 100 people, certainly. I mean, maybe there were maybe 60 people in there. Really, the VIPs. Did the same thing, got up there, checked a few passes. It was interesting that Martin Chambers of the Pretenders tried to get in and was turned away. I felt kind of bad for him. And I didn't have to actually tell Martin Chambers he couldn't get in, but I do remember him standing there looking kind of awkward and then slowly fading into the crowd. So I got in the same way, did the same thing, checked, and then walked inside. Now remember, I'm wearing this shirt, I'm wearing some pants that are falling down, some lousy black shoes, but I'm in the VIP party, kind of walking around like I'm doing something important. Back in the VIP area, people were all talking about, is Townsend going to show up? He didn't. None of the Who came. Sylvester Stallone was there. Cheech Marin was there. Christina Applegate was there. It was a new thing, her on Married with Children, so she was kind of a big deal. Patti LaBelle from the show was there. She had played the Acid Queen in the show. And lo and behold, there was Elton John and his lyricist Bernie Taupin sitting at one of the tables. Well, I hovered around. Oh boy, the idea that I would shake hands with Elton John, I thought, I'm just going to walk up to him and say, I would like to shake the hand that wrote Burn Down the Mission and Pinky, and hold my hand out, and thought, you know, those are kind of two different sort of songs and not first tier stuff. You know, he'll know I'm a real fan if I name those songs, and they're great songs. Finally, I'm hovering around, and he turns to Bernie Taupin and says, Us Magazine is here. Let's go. He used a very descriptive term about Us Magazine in there that I'll leave off YouTube. But anyway, Us Magazine is here. Let's go. They got up to go, and I thought, this is my chance. And he turned, and he's standing right in front of me. And all this happened within just a couple seconds. I'm going to hold my hand out and shake his hand. And I just froze, like Jackie Gleason and the Honeymooners. And to his credit, he gave me my moment. He stood there. He knew what was coming. I mean, afterwards I realized he knew what was coming, and he was giving me my moment. And then he sort of just saw I couldn't handle it, shrugged, and walked off. He handled it beautifully. Probably would have handled a handshake just fine from a fan. That was my close encounter with Elton John. Hope you've enjoyed this. I know it's a little different, but I just wanted to tell that story, show you my shirt. This is the first time I've had it on since that night in 1989, and it's still just as hot as I remember it. Later on, some of the performances from the Universal Amphitheater and others were released on this box set, joined together. It's not a great set, and it doesn't include any of the guest performances from the Universal Amphitheater. Those are available on that DVD that was released in 2006. Thanks for watching. We'll get back to the Beach Boys next week. There is a lot more to talk about with the Beach Boys. We've hardly begun to scratch the surface with them. We'll be back to that next week. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. We'll see you again next time.